All right. So, Ben, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself fully and let us know your background and what we'll be talking about today.
For sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Feimer. I'm the credit building manager here at Justine Petersen. I did share my screen. Sia, can you see it all right? Okay, cool. So I'm the credit building manager at Justine Petersen. Some of you might have heard of us. We've been around since '97. We're a nonprofit located on North Grand. So we're just like a block north of the VA on North Grand, right across from Clyde C. Miller. And we've been here in St. Louis for quite some time, and we really focus on really three things. And I'm just going to go ahead and change the slide. So Justine Petersen's core products focuses on three main things. One is credit building and financial education, which is my department. That's what I'm doing right now. We're working on some financial education and focusing on one-on-one credit building. And we're going to get into what that is a little bit later. We also work on home ownership preparation and retention, which is essentially if somebody's looking to purchase a home, they come and sit down with us. We talk about what all goes into a home purchase as far as how does one require a mortgage, what's the credit requirements for that kind of thing, and that whole process. And then we actually hook them up with different mortgage lenders throughout the St. Louis area and help them purchase a home. And we also do micro enterprise lending and training, and that's a vast majority of our business. And so micro enterprise really just means small business. So I don't know if some of you might have heard of the SBA that was doing a lot of lending during the pandemic. But the SBA stands for the Small Business Administration, and we are an official SBA lender. And so we do a lot of our business based on if somebody's coming in and looking for help to start a business or get a loan for a business, and they might not necessarily qualify through like a mainstream bank for whatever reasons. One, their credit might not be excellent, or their loan amount is a little too small for a bank to consider it worthwhile. We do a lot of small business lending. We're actually one of the SBA's largest micro lenders in the entire country. So we really do it all. We help people build their credit, we help them purchase homes, and we help them fund their businesses or take their current business to the next level. So we do all that kind of stuff. If you guys have questions about the home ownership aspect or the small business lending aspect, please ask me about it. We can connect later. I'll be sending out this presentation as well as my contact information will be on the final slide, so you guys can write that stuff down. I'll send out an email. Sia can send out my contact info. We can do the whole thing. So if you guys want to connect with me afterwards, please feel free to reach out. And I'm actually going to disagree with Sia. If you guys have questions, please ask me during the presentation. I know that it's kind of difficult to have a call and response over Zoom, but if you have a question about some topic that I'm going into right now, or you have an anecdote about your life and how credit has affected it, please share. I'd be more than happy to talk through it with you guys, okay? The more interactive, the better, in my opinion. I don't want to just like talk at black boxes the entire time, if possible. So with that being said, I want to kind of go back to actually the first slide of this presentation, which is how to play the credit game. And my experience with credit is that it's kind of what's the right word? It's a mystery until you learn how it works. And there are specific rules with credit that govern how that whole aspect of your credit and your credit score work. And then once we know the rules, then we can play the game properly and we can succeed. And Bryn asked me a question of how did I get started with the company? I actually, I graduated from Missouri State down in Springfield, Missouri. I went into finance. I was a stockbroker for a number of years, and I got into financial management and retirement planning. And I got fairly bored with that. So I quit that and I went and joined the Peace Corps. And I spent 2 years in Central Asia in a small village in Mongolia, teaching English. And so if any of you have ever heard of Mongolia, look it up. It's a crazy country. I lived in what's called a yurt, Y-U-R-T. So feel free to Google that later. But essentially, I spent 2 years in a countryside living in a tent teaching English. And then I came back to St. Louis and I wanted to take the community development and nonprofit aspect of the Peace Corps and mix it with my financial background. And that's how I came to be with Justine Petersen. We're a nonprofit that helps build up our community through proper financial education and giving people access to money that might not normally get it. So that's a little bit of background for me. Thank you for asking, Bren. And so now that we've talked about where I'm coming from and what Justine Petersen does, let's talk a little bit more about credit. So this slide that we're on now is called Common Credit Misconceptions. And I'm not going to read everything to you. I want to have more of just let's talk about it and let's go in a little bit deeper into the facts and what all this stuff means. But I'm willing to bet that somebody on this presentation has either said one of these things or heard a family member say one of these things in their life, or a community member. You know, I can't afford to have good credit. I just filed bankruptcy. I can't get credit. I'm on check systems. I can't get access to a traditional loan, all sorts of stuff like that. Somebody saying I have no credit or I'm always denied, I can't build it. Those are things that I hear every single day. And so the main point of this slide is that these are misconceptions. And the reason that these statements are made out in our community is because people are unaware of how the credit system works. And so part of what I'm doing here today is that you guys are in this youth jobs program, you're going out there, you're getting ready to tackle life and get out and join jobs and start professions and all that stuff. And I'm here to tell you that that's amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. But at the same time, we need to know how this whole credit system works and how it can benefit from us and how we can benefit from it. Because to me, credit is pervasive. It's all around us and it can affect a lot of the things that we do. I liken your credit score to kind of like your adult report card. And the reason for that is that it follows you around. People check it wherever you go. Once you graduate from high school or whatever school that you go to, graduate from college, people don't really care about your grades too much anymore. Financially and professionally, people start paying attention to your credit score a lot more. So if somebody's seen one of these misconceptions, please feel free to, give a thumbs up or some sort of reaction. But I'm willing to bet somebody has said one of these things before. So let's keep going. I want to next talk about why credit building. So if somebody can either unmute and please respond or type in the chat, whatever you want to do. But what do you think of when you think of credit? What's the first thing that comes to mind? And Sia, you can absolutely participate if you want. What does credit mean to you? Zaria said money. That's good. Yeah. Anybody else? Sia, you unmuted, so you have to talk
now. Credit means to me, I guess like my ability or trustworthiness, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good one. Your ability is a good example. Therese said money that isn't yours. That's a great one. Correlate credit with buying a house. Yeah, those are all great examples, guys. Thanks for sharing. So credit is, it's access. Access is the first word that comes to mind for me when I think of credit, because when we talk about credit, we're talking about being given access to money at a reasonable rate. And so what I mean by that is that you can live your life paying cash for everything, and that is okay. But that whole cash is king philosophy really isn't as valid anymore compared to like the 80s or 90s. And the reason for that is that everything's connected. And it really does give you access to different things. Credit, and the idea of credit, gives you access to mainstream financing. So that's buying a house, that's buying a car without you having to pay for it. So Bryn brought up a good spot, to obtain goods or services before payment. That's right. So it gives you access. So you go to a car lot, they run your credit, say this person's probably going to pay me back. And so they give you a car, and that you're making monthly payments on. They give you that car along with a loan. And so that's what this whole idea behind credit building is that know how a credit system works so that we can get access to things that we might not be able to get access to otherwise. As a credit building professional, as the credit building manager at Justine Petersen, I sit down with people every day and we talk about credit and why it's important, and how it can be a barrier for some people. A lot of the one-on-one credit building that I do, we do a lot of lending combined with that. And we have people come in and say, I can't get access to an apartment. I can't get access to certain jobs. I can't get a car if I don't have my credit in order. And that's a fair statement, right? If you don't have your credit in order, there can be a severe barrier. So these are all things that having a good credit score can provide. And one of the main things that I love about building credit and making sure somebody has a good credit score is that they don't have to work with predatory lenders. Have you heard that term before, predatory lenders? That's another word that we use for like payday loans or title loans or something like that. Does anybody know what the average interest rate is for a payday loan in Missouri? Can anybody guess?
You said average percent?
Yeah, average interest rate for a payday loan.
Is it like 56%?
Man, I wish it was that low.
76,
I wish it was that low.
90?
I wish it was that low.
140.
I wish it was that low.
200?
The average payday interest rate in Missouri is 455%. That's the average.
Oh wow.
That's crazy, right? That's the average interest rate for a loan. The reason that we want to make sure that we have good credit is so that we can avoid something like that. So 455% is the average. Does anybody want to guess what the law is in Missouri, where they topped it out at that you can't go above? I bet you can't. You know what? I'm not even going to ask you guys to guess because it's
Can you repeat that?
So what'd you say, Brent?
I said, can you repeat that, please?
The average or the maximum?
Oh.
The maximum interest rate for a payday loan in Missouri is 1,024% interest. 1,024. If we have good credit or decent credit, we can make sure to avoid stuff like that because the payday loans they're really a trap, is how I think of them. So why credit building? Let me bring it back to what it is that we're talking about. So one of the main reasons is access and avoiding negative loans. But we also have this idea of if you have this philosophy of credit as an asset, it's going to help you save so much more money long term. Somebody with a good credit score is probably going to save $250,000 over their lifetime in interest and fees. Does that make sense to everybody? If you have low interest, if you have good credit score, you're not going to wind up with a loan product or some sort of checking account or something that they have for like second chance that costs you a lot. So if you have a good credit score, then you're going to save a bunch of money. And the reason for that is really interest rates. Interest rates is the main thing when we think of having good credit and having access. So this is a very super duper basic example, and I want to run through this real quick and make sure it makes sense to everybody. So if you have someone purchasing a car and it's a $10,000 auto loan with a 5-year payback. So the car, you're borrowing $10,000 to purchase a $10,000 car. and you're going to pay that back over 5 years. If you have a low credit score, you can wind up with something like a 25% interest rate. And that's actually not that bad when compared to some of the other interest rates that I see out here. I see people every day that get an automobile loan and they're paying like $800 a month for a car. And with an $800 a month payment, you should be driving like a Beamer or something like that. And these people are driving like 2 or 3 year old Toyotas. And because they have such a poor credit score, that's really all that they can get. They can get a loan where they got to pay $800 for an okay car, or not an okay car even. So let's bring it back to the math real quick. So somebody gets saddled with a 25% interest rate because they have a low credit score, and they wind up paying somewhere in the realm of $294 a month, which means that their total interest payments for the life of this loan is $7,600, which really means that they're paying $17,000 for a $10,000 car. That's crazy, right? And that's something that I see every day. If you have your credit in a good position, then you can avoid getting saddled with something like a 25% interest rate, which is going to save you a ton of money. Another example on this one is somebody with an excellent credit score, and they have, what is it, like a 5%, they wind up with a 5% interest rate. And that's not that amazing. You can get like 2.5% or lower on certain vehicle loans if you have a really, really good score. So somebody with a 5% interest rate is only going to pay $189 a month. So paying less than $190 a month for that same car that somebody's paying $290 a month. So the total math comes out to they're only paying $1,300 in interest. So they're only paying $11,323, sorry, for a $10,000 car. Does everybody see where this math makes sense? If you have a great interest rate, you can save a ton of money long term. Any questions on that before I move on? All right, I counted to 3. Nobody had a question, so we're good. I'm going to keep moving. All right, so let's talk about, we already talked about payday loans. I'm skipping around a little bit. Sorry about that. If you have a credit card, a lot of people think it's something that they have to use all the time, and we're going to get into proper credit card usage a little bit later. But I want to put this idea in the back of your minds of, if you pay your credit card back in full each and every month, then you're not paying any interest. So you can think about it as like a 30-day 0% interest loan that if you pay back in full, you don't owe that money anymore, right? You don't owe any extra money. So I like to put this out there so that people have that in the back of their mind moving forward, because it's so easy. Unfortunately, it's so easy to get caught in that payday loan trap of, I don't have access to this money until payday, but I've got a bill coming up tomorrow. If you use something like a credit card and you pay it down at the end of the month after you get paid, you don't have to worry about that. All right. So let me know if you guys have questions about that. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep moving forward. So how do we build credit? All right. This is the secret sauce. This is one of 2 slides that I think are the most important thing in this presentation. So if you don't take anything else away from me today, take away this equation. This is the easiest and simplest way to build credit. We need 2 to 3 good active lines of credit. We need to make sure that we're making monthly payments on them every month on time. And we need to make sure that those monthly payments are being reported to the credit bureaus. We do that every single month, and our credit score will rise. There's a lot of other extenuating circumstances out there. If you have negative debt, that can affect it. We're going to get into all that stuff. But the long and the short of it is, if we're making payments on loans and credit cards each and every month on time, your score will improve. All right. Any questions about this? I'm going to get into the specifics on this in a second. But any questions about this in general? Okay. And you guys can type your questions into the chat as well. We'll hit it at the end as well. No big deal. So let's talk about let's start from the end of the equation. Reported to the credit bureaus every month. There's three major credit bureaus. Have you heard of these guys before? TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Have you guys heard of them before? Give me a thumbs up if you have, or whatnot. But let's talk about what it is that these organizations do. So TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax are private companies whose job it is to collect information. That's all that they do. They're called the credit bureaus, but really they are repositories of client information. That's all that they do. So the credit bureaus are private companies who collect information, and then they take that information and then run it through a credit scoring model. And then that credit scoring model gives you a number, which is your credit score. And then that number is sold to banks and lenders to determine your credit worthiness. So the long and the short of it is that credit is nebulous, it's confusing. There's not a ton of great, accurate information out there because of the fact that we aren't the customer when it comes to your credit score. You're the product. Your information is being sold to banks to determine whether or not you're a good investment for their money. Now, if that sounds pretty negative, it is. I don't think it's a great system. I think that it is set up in a way that people can wind up really hurt long term, and it's hard to recover from it. But if you're armed with the knowledge that we're going to talk about, the more information that we have, the better and easier it is to avoid negative stuff in the past and negative stuff moving forward, and how we can recover and grow our score even more. So Jessica asked, what is considered good credit? So that's a great question, Jessica. So your credit score is based on a range of 300 to 850. Whenever I ask somebody what they think a good credit score is, more often than not, I hear the number 700. I think that is more of a marketing campaign than anything. Like Credit Karma is always talking about get your score up to 700, 700, 700, 700. Generally, anything above a 600 to me is pretty decent credit. And the reason that I say that is that you can get a home loan, you can get a mortgage for with your score somewhere around 620 to 640 here in St. Louis. So anything above 600 is okay. The higher that you get, the better. What's considered excellent credit, because they have these like subdivisions in the credit score spectrum of what's bad, good, okay, and excellent. Anything above probably 725, 740, anything above 725 is considered excellent. So you can get access to most products out there with a decent credit score. Anything above like a 625, 650, you can probably get access to. Are you going to get the best possible interest rates out there? Probably not. The higher your credit score, the better it is for you when it comes to interest rates, when it comes to all sorts of stuff like that. Bryn asked a great question. What if I'm not planning to apply for a loan? Does my credit still matter? Yes, it does. And the reason that it does is that it's not, people aren't checking your credit score for loan worthiness anymore. They're still doing that. That's still a main aspect, but they're checking your credit for all sorts of other stuff out there these days as well. Employers check your credit. Some schools or training programs check your credit. Apartment complexes check your credit. Landlords check your credit. It really is your adult report card. It doesn't matter if you're not trying to get a loan, but if you're trying to do other things out there in life, having a good or decent credit score just makes sense. It makes sense even if you're not applying for a loan. Having a good or decent credit score is going to help you out long term. And the reason for that is that you might wind up not applying for a loan, but you want to open up a new checking account that's going to give you like a 1% interest on all the money that you have saved in there, or something like that. Banks are opening up and doing new different products all the time to help you save. But there are certain categories that they run your credit to make sure that you qualify for it. So keep that in mind, all right? So let's bring it back real quick to what a credit score is. A credit score is a number based on a range of 300 to 850. It's a number telling people how likely you are to pay them back. That's all that it is. All right, the higher your number, you are more statistically likely to pay somebody back. And that's why that number matters in so many different aspects of life these days, even if you're not looking for a loan right now. If you are a hiring manager at a company and you have two qualified candidates, they have similar backgrounds, it's similar position, or two qualified candidates applying for the same position, and you run their credit, and you have one person that's had 2 bankruptcies, they've had an auto loan go bad, had a car repossessed, they have some outstanding debt sitting out there. When you have somebody that's never missed a payment on their credit card before, has an auto loan that they've been paying on time, which one of those people would you hire? All right. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not less qualified than the person with a good credit score, but for a hiring manager, they want as many different aspects of a person as possible. Okay, does that make sense? So a credit score is just a number telling people how likely you are to pay them back. The real meat of the presentation is this next slide. I already talked about that equation, 2 to 3 good active lines, but the next part is what makes up a credit score. So if you guys have the ability to take screenshots, feel free to do so. Write this stuff down. Again, I'm going to be sending out these slides later so you guys can have access to it. But this next slide, I think, is the most important one. So what makes up a good credit score? So we're going to get into this in a second. I want to review these questions because a few people posted some stuff. Give me one sec. So I think Brent asked another question. Is it true that having good credit, different companies such as car companies treat you better than someone with bad credit? I don't necessarily know what you mean by this, Bren, as far as treat somebody better. So I don't think that if they run your credit and you have a 500, they're going to ask you to leave or anything crazy like that. But they will offer you significantly worse deals for a car. Somebody that walks in with an 800 or an 825 or an even an 850, they can probably wind up with the lowest possible interest rate and very little money down to walk away with a vehicle, because they're statistically more likely to pay somebody back in full and never miss a payment because their credit score is so high. All right. But I'm not saying that somebody with an 800 is a better person than somebody with a 500. That's not the case at all. That has nothing to do with it. It's more about how likely somebody is to pay you back. And that does come into play when certain companies are looking to make a financial transaction with you. So keep that in mind already. So I think it was Asia asked, how often does a credit score get updated? That's a great question, Asia. We're actually going to get into that in just a second. But generally, every creditor will update at least once a month. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in a sec. So, and Bryn's asking one more question. Sorry, guys. So if you were trying to get a loan from a bank, they'll offer you with good credit than bad. Yeah, so essentially, Bryn, yeah. So if you're trying to get a loan with a bank and somebody pulls your credit score and you have an 800, you're going to get a better deal. And if you have a low score, you might not get that deal at all, if that answers your question. And Alexis asked a great question. Do they charge you to check your credit score? Yes and no. So I'm actually going to go back one slide real quick because I didn't cover this. I got excited and wanted to move forward with a credit score, so sorry. But there are several different kinds of credit scoring models out there. There's the FICO, and then there's Vantage. Have you guys heard of Credit Karma before? If you've heard of Credit Karma, it's an app that lets you check your credit and see what's going on. Generally, Credit Karma is an amazing tool to see what's on your credit score, what's on your credit report, excuse me. but the score, the numbers that they give you are not the same numbers that the banks are looking at. The banks are looking at the FICO score. So if you're not seeing a FICO score, then it doesn't really matter. So keep that in mind. All right. So let's talk about what makes up a credit score. So your payment history makes up 35% of your credit score. And that makes sense, right? You know, if your credit score is a number telling people how likely you are to pay them back, the biggest portion of that score is, have you been making payments on time? Right? That goes back to that equation that we went into a little bit earlier. We want to be making good on-time payments. And the more on-time payments that you have, the better it is for your score. So that's 35% of your score. The next biggest portion is your current total debt. And that's made up of good debt and bad debt. So good debt are things like loans and credit cards that we're actively paying on. And bad debt is things that we think of when we think of debt. So like maybe a collection or a credit card that went bad and is closed and you currently owe the company money, something like that. So good debt and bad debt make up another 30%. So 65% of your score is based on, are you actively borrowing money and are you paying it back on time? That's where a majority of your score comes from, right? Because it's a number telling people how likely you are to pay them back. So that's 65% of your score. Are you actively borrowing money? And that's in the form of loans and credit cards. Next is length of credit history. That's 15% of your score. The longer that you've been paying something back, the better it is for your score, because that's more payment history. That's more instances of on-time payments, so that the algorithms, which are these credit scoring models, these equations can have more information to determine your risk as a borrower, because that's what a credit score is. It's a number telling people how risky you are if they lend you money. Next is requests for new credit. So anytime that you apply for something, that's called a hard pull. And we're going to get into hard pulls and soft pulls in a little bit. We're going to get into that. But the other words for that is hard inquiry and soft inquiry. I don't know if you guys have heard those terms before, but anytime you apply for something, that you can lose between, I think it's between 3 and 8 points off of your score each time it's done, which is a little crazy. But the reason that you lose points when you apply is because a credit score is a number telling people how likely you are to pay them back. So if you're applying for something new, that means that you could be opening up a new loan, a new credit card, a new whatever, which means that you might run out of time or run out of money, which means that you might not be able to pay somebody back. It's a little backwards thinking in my mind, but anytime you apply for something, you're going to lose some points. And that's okay. And the reason that that's okay is because we're in this for the long haul. Credit isn't like a quick flip of a switch and you can jump up 90 points in a month. That very rarely happens. The point is opening up good, strong trade lines like loans and credit cards that have good value for them, paying them back on time, and then that helps build up your credit score long term. All right, so keep that in mind. And if anybody wants to, the credit building that we do at JP is totally free. So we are a nonprofit. And so the one-on-one credit building that we do doesn't cost you anything. And we use what's called a soft inquiry, so it doesn't affect your score when we pull your report. So please feel free to reach out to me if you want to get your credit checked and pulled free of charge. I'll be more than happy to go over it with you, talk about what we call a credit action plan and how we can improve your score over time. So the last part of your credit score is types of credit in use. So that's loans and credit cards. If we only have loans on our credit report, your score won't be as high as if you have a mix. If you only have credit cards on your credit report, your score won't be as high as if you have a mix. So just keep that in mind. So let's talk about active lines of credit. So there's two types. And some of you might have heard these terms before, some of you might not. The active lines of credit, the active trade lines are installment trade lines and revolving trade lines. I don't know, some of you might have heard those terms, some of you might not have, but installment is another word for a loan. And it's called an installment because of the way that we pay on it. So with a loan, you take out a chunk of money, and then you have a set payback schedule that you make payments in installments until that loan is finished and you finish paying it off entirely. So what an active trade line, an active installment looks like is it has a balance, it has a monthly payment, and it's not closed. All right. So if you paid off a loan last month, that's not affecting your score anymore. What's kind of crazy is when you finish paying off a loan, you can actually lose points on your credit score. I finished paying off my student loans last year. My credit score dropped 24 points when I did it, which is crazy, right? When you finish paying off a car loan, your score drops. And the reason for that is that when you finish paying off a loan, you just closed it. It's done. While you're paying on it, those on-time payments count and help boost up your score. But when you finish paying a loan off, that payment history, which makes up a bulk of your score, goes away. And so you can lose points because of it. So just keep that in mind. If you have student loans that are in deferment or forbearance, those aren't really affecting your score at all because you're not making any monthly payments on it. They can affect your score in a negative way if you've got a whole bunch of student loans, but if we're not paying on them, they're not really affecting your score. But while I was paying on my student loans, while they were active, that was helping boost my score up tremendously. And then finally, a collection or a charge-off are not active trade lines. They're not helping boost your score because of the reason is that they're closed. They're a negative debt collection. And we can get into what those look like a little bit later. Any questions on this installment before I move on? An installment is just a loan. We want to make sure that we have an on-time payment each and every month to help boost your score. Okay, so let's move on to the other one, which is called the revolving. So an active revolving trade line is just a credit card or line of credit. So credit cards are significantly different from loans because we only have to pay back what we use on them. So if you have a credit card that you haven't used and used ever, or have never made a purchase on it, or you finished paying off a purchase a while ago and you haven't used it since, that can still be considered active, but the monthly payment is what helps drive up your score. So if you haven't used a credit card, generally within like 6 to 8 months, sometimes those credit cards will close out entirely. So keep that in mind. If you have a credit card, you ideally want to be using it and ideally paying it down to zero each and every month. And the reason for that is that we only get charged interest on the money that we don't pay back. So if anybody has questions about how credit cards work, they can be very confusing. Please feel free to ask that question now, or we can ask it towards the end. How much? Oh, I've only got 20 minutes left, so I'll keep going. So, because see, we're done at 4, right? Okay, cool. So a credit card that hasn't been verified within the last 6 to 12 months on your credit report, that can be considered closed. And if the credit card is closed, then it isn't affecting your score in any way. So just keep that in mind, okay? Any questions on this? Oh, somebody asked, if a card closes, will it hurt my credit score? Yes, it can hurt your score because you're taking an active trade line with payment history. And if it's closed, then that payment history goes away and it's no longer helping boost your score. Essentially, anytime you close a revolving or an installment trade line on your credit report, anytime you close a loan or a credit card, you can lose points because of that. So just keep that in mind moving forward. The whole idea behind the credit system is that they want you to keep using it, keep making purchases, keep making payments every month to improve your score. Now, I'm not saying that you need to do that as a person. I'm saying that if you want a higher tiered credit score, we need to know that we need to use them appropriately. So that way we're not paying any kind of crazy money on interest, and it can help us boost our score up over time so that we can get access to what we need down the road. So just keep that in mind. Somebody asked, do I have to open a new one after it closes or just keep it and restart? Oh, that's a great question. So some companies, if you have a credit card that you used a while ago and then it closes because you don't use it anymore or whatever, closes for whatever reason. If you reach out to that credit card company, sometimes they'll let you reopen it and keep that payment history. You just reopen that credit card. Some companies will say, no, it's closed. You have to start a new one. If you start a new one, then that means that your payment history goes away. So it's a brand new credit card, and that can hurt your score for starting something new. So just keep that in mind. It's better to use a credit card sparingly. I'm not saying spend money that you don't need to spend or purchase something that you don't need to purchase. But if you have a credit card that's not tied to a particular store or something like that, you can go to the gas station and buy a pack of gum or like a tank of gas and then pay that down at the end of the month. That is considered an on-time payment. I help people get credit cards all the time. And what some people are afraid of, like making those monthly payments and like staying on top of it because it can get out of hand. But I help people get credit cards, and what we do is we set up their Netflix bill on it each and every month. So Netflix is what, like $15, $16. It goes up I feel like every 6 months these days. But Netflix is a regular monthly payment that's relatively low. And what we do is we get them set up with Netflix on their credit card, and then we get their bank to set up an auto pay to pay off that credit card at the end of every month for that $16, $17. So that way they don't even have to swipe that card, but they're making a purchase and they're making a payment each and every month, which is helping boost their score up. Somebody asked, how much would it affect me if your card closes? I can't say for sure. Unfortunately, when somebody asks me these questions, inevitably during these presentations, is how many points will I lose? I can't answer that question because everybody's payment history and everybody's credit profile is different. So I can't say you're going to lose 15 points if your credit card closes. I've seen people lose 15. I've seen people lose 20. I've seen people lose 10. It really just depends. If you've got a lot of other stuff going on your credit report, if you've got like a car loan, you've got a personal loan, you've got another credit card, something like that, and you close a trade line, that probably won't affect you as much as if you only have one credit card and that's the only thing that you're paying on each and every month. If you close out your only trade line, your score can take a pretty dramatic hit because you don't have anything else to help boost up your score over the intervening months. So just keep that in mind. Any other questions before I move on? All right. So let's go and touch back on Justine Petersen's credit building model. So I don't want you, if you guys have had negative credit stuff in the past, I don't want you to focus on that. All right. Dealing with negative debts is a really big, important part of having your credit score get to as high of the score as possible. But focusing on the good active trade lines, getting the good stuff going is really what's going to start that whole credit engine. All right. So have 2 to 3 active lines. Make sure that those trade lines are paid on time each and every month. And the other part, something that I haven't touched on, is keep your credit card balances low. Has anybody heard of that 30% utilization rule when it comes to a credit card? Has anybody heard that term before? The only person who I can see is Sia, and she's nodding her head. So thank you for that. So if you haven't heard that term before, when you have a credit card, you have what's called a credit limit, which is the most money that you could spend on that card in any given month. So for example purposes, say Sia has a $1,000 credit card, all right, or a credit card with $1,000 limit, excuse me. The most she could spend on that card is $1,000. If she were to spend $1,000 on that credit card and what's called max it out, which means you can't spend any more, then it would be vitally important for her to pay that down to zero, pay that $1,000 back before the end of that particular month. And the reason for that is that when that new payment cycle comes around, they charge you interest on anything that you haven't paid back. So number one, most important thing, like I said, pay on time. If you have a credit card balance and you're not able to pay it back in full, then you need to make at least what's called the minimum payment on your credit card. All right, every credit card has a minimum payment. Sometimes $20, sometimes it's $10, sometimes it's $500 if you have a $20,000 credit limit. It really just depends. But in order to improve your score long term, minimum payment is the most important thing. The next most important thing is ideally paying it down to zero. And then the third most important thing, about your credit card is that you want to keep your balances ideally under 30% of your total available credit. If you do that, then that's going to help boost your score up dramatically. And what I mean by that is if Sia has a $1,000 credit card, even if she's maxing it out each and every month,
Okay, I think you're back.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Sorry about that. So, what was I saying? Oh, credit utilization. So, if you have a $1,000 credit card, in order to maximize the benefit that credit card does to your credit score, you want to stay under $300, stay under that 30%. Because the reason for that is that those algorithms are watching how you use your credit card each and every month. So if you're using just a little bit of your credit and paying it down to zero,
I'm sorry, I can't really hear you.
Sia is using her credit cards responsibly. She's using. How about now? Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. So if you're using your credit card and you're paying it back, you don't need your credit card each and every month. Versus somebody that maxes out their credit cards each and every month and they make a minimum payment, they're saying that person needs that credit card to make it through the month. So keep that in mind, all right? I'm seeing a whole bunch of chats, so let me just pull that up real quick. I want to. So will my credit score be affected if I make a same payment each month, just not on the designated same day of the month? Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, it can get kind of confusing with paybacks. So when you have a credit card, you have a pay by date is probably the best way to describe it, is like your minimum payment is due, for instance, the 25th of the month. So if you have a $1,000 credit card, and you have a $50 minimum monthly payment, and you charge $200 on that card, you're staying below that 30%, which is ideal. But if you don't have $200 to pay, then you need to make at least that $50 payment, so it's counted as on time. For the rest of that $150 that you didn't pay back, they're going to charge you interest. And so your payment or your total amount might be owed. You might owe $175 at the beginning of the next month. So keep that in mind. All right, does that make sense? Will your credit be affected if you pay on your credit card early? It's only going to be, yes, it's going to be positively affected. As long as we pay it each and every month or make at least one payment, that's going to help boost your score. Do you recommend the student credit cards for someone who doesn't have credit at all? Oh, that's a great question. So if you don't have a credit card, there are student-focused credit cards, there are secured credit cards, there are store credit cards, there are cards that are designed for all different people. If you don't have a credit card, generally my recommendation, depending on what your goals are, is to get one. If we get a credit card, then we can help start boosting our score up even more. Feel free to reach out to me individually and we can talk about the best particular credit card for what it is that you want to do. All right. A prepaid card is different from a credit card. Yes, that is absolutely true. So there are different kinds of cards, but there are things called secured cards, unsecured cards, and prepaid cards. Generally, prepaid cards are
cards that you just like put a couple $100s on and then you can use them whenever down the road. Secured credit cards are just a regular credit card that you have to put a deposit down on in order to open. They're generally designed for people that are building their credit or rebuilding their credit. And that's something that we can talk about individually. And then unsecured credit cards are the typical credit card that you think of where you apply and they give you like $1,000 credit limit or something like that, okay? If I go past the credit card's balance limit for one payment and then pay it all back, will that affect my credit score? Yes, it will. So if you go past the balance limit, so if you have a $500 credit card, you make that minimum payment of $50. And so you have $450 that they're charging interest on. And then the next month, suddenly you owe $525. That will affect your credit score because you're maxing out your utilization. If you pay it down to zero, that is going to help your score. And if you continue to keep it low, that will help your score. So it can affect your score negatively if you max it out. But as long as you're paying it down and keep paying it down after that, that will help your score long term. Generally, it's going to help your score even if you're just making that minimum payment. It's just sometimes that minimum, if you're only making a minimum payment, then your credit card balances can really get out of control. And that's something that you really need to watch on because we've all heard the stories of those people that wind up $20,000 in credit card debt or something like that. So just keep that in mind. Somebody said, I've been told that student loans don't affect your credit score as bad as any other loans. Is that true? I mean, a loan is a loan. So if you're not making payments on your loan and you go delinquent on it, yes, that is pretty much the same as if you have a car payment that gets delinquent or something like that. That's really going to negatively affect your score.
I'm sorry, I was just pretty much saying like, because I feel like student loans are like easily like deferred than like another loan. So I was just saying like, what's like the difference between like a student loan and like, having another loan?
Yeah, so if you have a student loan that gets if you have a student loan that you don't defer and you're just actively paying back, you might fall behind on or something, that's like any other loan. The difference is with student loans is that they are easily deferred. And when they are deferred, they're not really affecting your credit score positively or negatively. But at the end of the day, it is a loan. So keep that in mind. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. And then I think somebody else asked a question of how can college students improve their credit score? And as well as what's a good credit score for a college student. So if you're above 18 or you're in college or whatever, and you're allowed to get a credit card or allowed to get a loan, something like that, generally, I would say the younger if you're just getting started, like having above a 600 is going to be positive. And now that you know these rules that we're going over and the best strategies, going from a 600 to a 700 within like a year or so is entirely doable. It's just focusing on maintaining that positive payment history. So the higher the better, but I'm not going to say that you need to have a 700 by the time that you're 20 or 21, because that doesn't really matter. What matters is that we're making on-time payments and we're getting access to the products that we want at the times that we want them. Okay. Once my 6 months from having a secured credit card is up, I understand that I'll apply for a normal one. Will my credit score be negatively affected for not using that secured card anymore? So there are some secured credit cards that actually just automatically convert into unsecured, or that you get a secured credit card and you have a credit limit of $300 and you make 6 months of on-time payments and they actually up your credit limit to 500 or 800 or whatnot. If you have a credit card that you think is going to change, you need to call and ask the company and make sure that they're not going to open up a new trade line, but they're just going to extend more credit. All right. Okay. So I'm going to bring it back because I've answered a bunch of questions real quick and I'm running very low on time, so I'm sorry. Focus on keeping credit card balances low, have relationships with creditors, have different types of credit. The last thing is having relationships with creditors is a really big deal. If you feel like you're going to be late, make a phone call to that organization, whether it be a loan or credit card company, whatever, and say, hey, I'm going to be late. Can you guys give me an extension? And more often than not, those companies will say yes. They don't want you to fall behind. They eventually want to get paid. So anytime that you make a phone call and say, hey, I'm not getting paid till Friday. I know my bill's due on Wednesday. Can we work something out? Generally, they're going to work with you. So just keep that in mind. And the more that you do that, every time you make a phone call, they're going to write a note in your file. So do that, and that way that'll prevent from a payment going negative or going bad or something like that. I have a couple more slides that I don't have a ton of time to go over, but know the statute of limitations on different things on your credit report, and they hang out for certain time frames. Hard inquiries versus soft inquiries. This is one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you guys about. So soft inquiry is generally used for educational purposes. That's something that we do at Justine Petersen. A hard inquiry is used by a lender to check a credit when they apply for a car loan, a credit card, whatever. If you are applying for a mortgage or a car loan, generally you are going to be applying with several different lenders to try to find the best deal. So they tend to sandwich all of those car loan checks and all those mortgage checks into like one credit pool, so you don't lose 50 points when you're shopping around. But it's only a 2-week window when you're shopping for all those things to count as just one hard pull. So if you're out there shopping for a vehicle, you want to make a decision sooner rather than later and not come back month after month after month. Okay, keep that in mind. How do I find out? Sorry, one second. How do I find out who's my creditor? That's a great question. So if you might have collections or something like that, checking Credit Karma, signing up for that is actually a super easy way to find out what's on your credit report. It's just that the scores aren't exactly the same, okay? So keep that in mind. But Credit Karma will tell you who you owe and the phone numbers and contact information for those organizations. Then when you come to me, we can talk about how we reach out to those organizations, what's the best way to set up a payment plan, something like that. Okay, anybody else? So I know that we're just at time. I'm gonna hit just like one or two more things. There's different kinds of bankruptcies out there. I want to say that most of you are, this is the STL youth's job, so I'm assuming that none of you are in positions to be declaring bankruptcy or you have severe debts that you need to get away from. If you are, please feel free to reach out to me. We can talk about what these bankruptcies look like down the road. But they're essentially ways of clearing out debt when you're falling behind and you don't have a way to pay it back. You have debt collection rights if you have negative debts that have gone bad and you're being harassed or you're getting blown up on your phone by collection organizations. If you are dealing with that, let me know. We can talk about how to deal with it. If you have ID theft, that's a really big deal when it comes to credit. I work with a lot of people that have been incarcerated and then they get their information stolen when they're in jail or prison or whatever. And all of a sudden they come out of prison and they owe $15,000 in credit cards that they've never had. So dealing with identity theft is a really big part of what's going on now. So if you or someone you know is dealing with something like that, have them reach out to me. We can talk about how to get that stuff scrubbed off of somebody's credit report. And this is the contact information. I know that I went through those last 5 slides super quick and I apologize for that, but I'll be sending out my information in this presentation to Sia. My contact information's here. If you want to set up a one-on-one credit building appointment, please just shoot me an email. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can also call us and in our main office and ask just to get set up with credit building. You'll get scheduled with a counselor. All of the credit building that we do, totally free of charge. So please feel free to reach out. If anybody has any questions, I'm okay to stay on for a few more minutes, but otherwise I'm good to go. Thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for asking so many great questions during the presentation.
Yes, you guys were really great. Thank you. Thank you too, Ren. I don't see any questions coming in the chat. So you all, Camille will send out this recording along with the slides, and it will also have Ben's contact information. So you guys can please utilize this free resource and sign up, because the earlier you get started, you'll make way less mistakes than I did when I got started. So yes, please utilize this free resource in the future.
Yeah, and I put my email address in the chat. Feel free to shoot me an email. And the sooner that you get started with credit building, the better. I didn't really know what I was doing when I first got started in this profession. And my credit score is over 800 now. So it doesn't take very long to get there. You just need to know what you're doing. So thank you guys so much for your time. Have a great day.
You too.